Welcome back. Well, given the current volatility in the cryptocurrency market, we thought it might be helpful to take a look at Bitcoin versus the S&P 500 stock index. Particularly, what we're looking at is a correlation between the two. And what we're measuring is a 30-day percentage change of Bitcoin compared to the 30-day percentage change of the S&P 500. Now, the premise is that Bitcoin will typically trade in a similar fashion to the stock market, risk on, risk off, meaning that when stocks go up, we would expect Bitcoin to go up, and when stocks go down, we'd expect Bitcoin to go down as well. They usually move in the same direction, unless, of course, there's a cryptocurrency specific news event, in which case cryptos may go down and stocks would go up, or vice versa. Well, the idea is that should we buy Bitcoin when it's underperforming the S&P 500, looking for a value play, or should we buy Bitcoin when it's outperforming the S&P 500, looking for a strong trend that may be developing? Well, this is what the data shows us. The blue line represents Bitcoin. The black histogram bars show us the divergence in performance over the past 30 days. So, for example, we take a look at late 2020. The blue line, Bitcoin, went up to around a 40,000 level. The black histogram bar showed us that Bitcoin was outperforming the S&P 500 by around 80% during that 30-day period of time. And on the other side, we take a look at June, July of 2021, when Bitcoin dropped back down quite a bit, again to the 40,000 level. It was underperforming the S&P 500. But again, the question remains, should we buy Bitcoin when it's underperforming the S&P 500 or when it's outperforming the S&P 500? Well, this is what the data actually shows us. We take a look at Bitcoin, which is represented by the red histogram bars, and the S&P 500, the blue histogram bars. Now, the x-axis over here shows us to the factor at which Bitcoin is outperforming or underperforming the S&P 500. And the y-axis shows us by how much. So, for example, when we see that Bitcoin is outperforming the S&P 500 by around 15%, we can expect, historically speaking, that we can make a maximum as much as 11% return on investment over the next 20 trading days. This shows us a forward performance over the next 20 trading days. How much can we make from Bitcoin? By the way, notice the blue histogram bars are relatively flat. They don't fluctuate quite a bit. The S&P 500 doesn't waver as much as Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is much more sensitive than the S&P 500 is in this measurement. Furthermore, we can see, for example, if we take a look at the red histogram bar at the 25% level, again, 25% shows us that Bitcoin is outperforming during that 30-day period of time, that Bitcoin is outperforming the S&P 500 by 25%. If we buy Bitcoin over the next 20 trading days, we can expect to make around 17% return on investment. Conversely, if we look to the times that Bitcoin is underperforming the S&P 500, we could expect it to continue to underperform the S&P 500. But it's also important to note that this outperformance correlation only exists until about the 45% level, which means as Bitcoin is outperforming the S&P 500 by around 45% over the last 30 days, that's about as much as we can expect. If we see Bitcoin begins to outperform the S&P 500 by 55, 65, 75%, that actually indicates that Bitcoin is overbought, and we should not buy it if it's very, very strong, if it's beating the S&P 500 by too much. These two markets, to some extent, are linked. So we should not try to buy Bitcoin if it's already moved a tremendous amount, only if it's outperforming the S&P 500 by a moderate amount. Take a look at the second quarter of 2021. Now, the red line represents Bitcoin. The gray histogram bars show us whether we have an outperformance or underperformance of Bitcoin relative to the S&P 500. And we can see the beginning of April, midpoint of April, as Bitcoin, the red line, was trending lower, we were outperforming the S&P 500, but it dropped into negative territory. And we see, just as the histogram bars started to turn negative, Bitcoin is around 40,000, but very quickly, by mid-May of that year, Bitcoin dropped from 40,000 down to 30,000. It shows us that Bitcoin is very much a trending market, that when it starts to break down, it breaks down a lot further. When it breaks out, it breaks out a lot further. Here's the fourth quarter of 2021. We can see the blue line Bitcoin was quite weak around 40,000 and started to trend higher. The black histogram bars show us to the factor at which Bitcoin was outperforming, or in this case, underperforming the S&P 500. But it turned positive right around early October of 2021. At that point, Bitcoin was around 50,000. But Bitcoin quickly skyrocketed up to around 65,000 during that period of time. And conversely, Bitcoin, as it began to base out around the 65,000 level, we can see its outperformance started to waver. Either the stock market started to catch up or Bitcoin started to lose some of its steam and it actually turned back to the downside. So I guess the premise here is that we want to try to buy Bitcoin when it is not outperforming the S&P 500, but it begins to outperform the S&P 500. When these histogram bars turn from negative to positive, take a look at present day. Well, going back to January of 2023, January 7th, we had a pretty much locked correlation, almost at zero. Bitcoin was around 15,000, or I should say around 18,000. And during that period of time, the Bitcoin S&P 500 relationship was rather flat. However, as Bitcoin started to trend higher, we saw the outperformance indicated by the black histogram bar started to increase, and Bitcoin quickly improved from 18,000 up to the current levels right around 23,000, or just a hair below that. So again, point being is that Bitcoin seems to be, at least this is what the data suggests, to be a very trending type of market that will follow through either to the upside or downside. And we should look for those periods of time when Bitcoin begins to outperform the S&P 500 and the data suggests it should follow through. And if we see Bitcoin starts to underperform the S&P 500, well, the data all suggests that it could move to the downside to a further extent. We hope this has been helpful. We look forward to seeing you back soon.